there, and welcome to the I Never Knew podcast, also known as Inc. This show dives into the life experiences of people who have been through it all and have come through the other side stronger, better, and triumphant. Each story is raw, authentic, and, at times, heartbreaking. One thing joins it all together: the fact that the stories can help the listener learn and grow. Hosted by life coach Maureen, she sits down each episode with a new guest who will empower the listener to set out on their self-discovery journey and start to heal. Now you'll be joined by Maureen and her special guest. Please enjoy the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of I Never Knew, But My Dog Did podcast. Yes, I've just added in, but my dog did, because of my dog-themed everything in my brand. So I'm so excited always to have the guests that I have, and my next guest, she tickles me. I can already tell she's just this go-getter who goes after what she wants. And she's very aligned with making sure that things happen the way she wants it to happen. And her story is really incredible. Her story of trauma that we're going to get into. But she wanted to talk earlier before we got on our podcast earlier in the week, and we got on a phone call and we just had a blast. We just had a party like we knew each other forever. It was so much fun. So I knew today would be fabulous. So today, guys, I'm going to be talking to Britt Ivy. She is an author, speaker, and women's coach. And some of the things she values most are kindness, honesty, and compassion. She works with women. It's inspired by her own experiences. As a teenager and into young adulthood, she was stuck in a vicious cycle of trying to numb and avoid her pain with unhealthy relationships, addictions, food, and destructive patterns, as many of us have, I know. Those teenage years can be really, really tough. After a long journey of discovery and hope, she was able to heal the shame with doses of empathy and compassion, and by utilizing a 3-step formula, heal for real. And she shares her story with other women to help them thrive in their lives, heal from past pain, and realize their dreams. So I'm super excited. So hello, Miss Britt.
Well, good day, Maureen. I'm so excited to talk with you too. I just love that we talked before, got on the phone, said hello, and it did feel like you were my long lost sister. So I've been looking forward to today and seeing how I can benefit your audience.
Absolutely. And those of you on YouTube, when you see the video, you should see how glowy she is. She's just stunningly beautiful, and she glows. You can tell she glows from the inside out. So I am so excited to dive right into your story. I know you're an author and speaker. So let's talk about what is your story and when did it begin? Tell us how this all started for you.
That being said, God's all of it for me. He's the Prince of Peace and the great healer, and is the guide of my life. So thanks to him, I'm still alive. I noticed that you have interviewed 14-time suicide survivor and all sorts of people that have gone through tragedy and trauma. And I just feel honored that you invited me here today to share a bit of my story in hopes that it can help somebody else heal.
You're meant to come across my path, sister. And I know that's why you're here. Like attracts like, and you were brought here because of your beautiful soul. So I'm the one that's honored that you're here. So let's go with our listeners and let them know where it all started for you.
Awesome. Well, it all started for me. You ask, I never knew. So a big subject that I handle in my coaching, and a special niche that I have, is helping women recover from ending a pregnancy. Because the world tells you there's no problem, it's not a big deal. You just go, you have a procedure, and there are no after effects. And I never knew that there were after effects until I made that decision in college. And I can kind of take you along a bit of a story to tell you how I found out about it
Yeah.
and what it's called. And maybe that would make it a little more fun and interesting than just reciting facts.
Sure.
So I do have a confession to make. I have no idea when I started. I had no idea how to convey this information to people. So what I did was decided just to tell them my true story.
Yeah. That's the best way. That's why I love this format. It's your truth. You just tell your story, and that's the best information we could give.
Okay, well, picture this. Come along with me like a movie scene. I'm in Seattle International Airport, and I hear over the loudspeaker, "Passenger Ivy, passenger Britt Ivy, last call, gate 24. I bolt out of the Starbucks line and start running towards gate 24. Just barely make it. Got on the plane by flashing my ticket. I see the stewardess uniform there, and I look at the plane and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's not a single seat. There's a sea of men in business suits, row after row of men in business suits. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but I spot one seat up on the left. So I head that way and I turned towards a lady sitting in the window seat and said, may I sit here? And she looked at me kind of funny. She looked like an older Florence Henderson, the mom from the Brady Bunch.
Yes.
So she says, sure. And by the way, what do you do when you don't want someone to sit next to you on an airplane? You pile your stuff there, right?
Right.
Done. So she starts moving her book and her purse and her belongings, and finally looks at me kind of exasperated and just says, I'm just trying to get home to my husband in Oregon. And now there's some delay for some passenger Ivy. I'm like, flop into the seat. And then she politely turns to me and says, hi, I'm Ginny. And she looked at me, though, like, who the heck are you? And why'd you have to sit here? So I'm thinking, I'm passenger Ivy, but I don't want her to know that. So I turned to her and just said, are you on vacation? Just kind of break the ice, And she says, no, I've been visiting my granddaughter in college. As soon as she said the word college, Maureen, it was like I was triggered. Something set off in me, because usually on a plane, I don't want to talk to anybody. Just do my own thing. I even have earplugs. And instead, after hearing her say college, I start telling her my entire college life story and just start pouring my guts out to her. And they were happy years and fun years at first. I shared with her how I fell in love at 19 on campus, and we basically fell in love, and it was love at first date, and people called us Ken and Barbie. We were inseparable. We just went to Santa Barbara beaches in the morning to surf before college classes. Well, Tom surfed. I worked on my tan and did my English homework, but we had a blast. It was a dream, and I was in heaven. And one value that Tom and I had was we wanted to start each day happy. Positivity was a big deal. So when Tom would bring me coffee in the morning, we would jump up and we had this ritual and go, I feel good. Like James Brown, right?
Right.
So we start the day like that. And one morning, I'm late for psychology class and I'm running through the kitchen and I see the calendar on our fridge and I realized I hadn't had my period since March. And it was June.
Oh boy.
So 2 hours later, I'm sitting on the bathroom sink waiting for the second plastic pregnancy test that I took to show me line or no line. And I'm panicking. This is impossible. I'm on birth control. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to tell my parents. I can't imagine telling my parents. And the pit in my stomach turned to nausea. I was always the responsible one. And I didn't know who to trust with my secret. And finally, I remembered my girlfriend from Orange County. She was a little more worldly. And I called Kim, and frantically, I'm, Kim, this is what's going on. And she just says, Britt, it's no big deal. I've ended 2 pregnancies. A lot of women have done it. And I'm thinking, I don't know anyone who's done it until that moment. And when I went home, Tom said, look, I'll do anything to support you that you want, whatever you choose. And I'm thinking, I want you to choose. So suddenly, Maureen, it was no longer our decision. It was my decision. And I felt totally alone. And I knew I couldn't put it off much longer. And today, when you need to research, where do you go? You go to the internet, right?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? There was no internet back then. And I was totally too ashamed to tell anybody. So panic set in. And 2 weeks later, Kim drove me to the clinic in her white Celica. And after the procedure, she had told me it was no big deal. I'm thinking, well, if it's no big deal, why am I escorted out the back door to her running car? And then she stopped and got an ice cold six-pack of beer on the way home and just left me on my couch. And there I am, numb. Now, life spiraled down fast after that. And I have to just ask you, I don't know, I've listened to various of your podcasts, and I don't want to go on with a monologue here. I'm about halfway through this story to let you know how I learned about this and why I'm passionate about it. Shall I keep going?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I don't want to interrupt in the middle of your story. Absolutely. Oh, I'll jump in. You've heard my podcast. I would definitely jump in, but
I love it.
I love it when you're in your story and you know, I'm totally engaged. I want to know how this ends.
Life spiraled down fast after that. And one day I even called a doctor. I called their office and I pretended I was doing research for a school paper. And I asked them, how many Vicodin would it take to kill a 110-pound person? And then I began starving and stuffing myself daily. And before long, I was totally imprisoned by an eating disorder, which for me was the ultimate life of shame. And I started sabotaging opportunities that I worked really hard to get. And like the time I got an audition for a TV show, and all I had to do was run down to Malibu Beach in a red bathing suit. So all I had to do. Sound familiar?
Yes.
Baywatch.
Yes.
And the next morning, I didn't even show up for the audition. I was too hungover. So it's in this cycle of self-sabotage. And now keep in mind, I'm telling all this to the lady on the plane, and I look up and connect eyes with her, and the tears I've been holding back for 15 years bust out like Niagara Falls, and there I am, mascara streaking down my face, falling in front of a complete stranger. And she looks at me, and she says, Britt, and she reaches down, she pulls a pamphlet out of her purse and hands it to me and says, take a look at this. If you can see it, you can free it. And I turned it over and it read, do you suffer from suicidal thinking, self-sabotage, eating disorders, abusive relationships? I turned to her and I said, wow, they know me.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, I had to write down what you said. If you can see it, you can free it. So when you see me look away, I'm writing these things down. You hear that, audience? If you can see it, you can free it. So she knows you. She gets you.
Well, this pamphlet, she said, why don't you turn that over? So I did. And the 3 words on the other side of that pamphlet, Maureen, made the broken pieces of my life all of a sudden seem to just fall into place. And it read, PAT, post-abortion trauma. Wow. Now, have you ever heard of PTSD?
Yes.
Post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay,
Yeah.
great. And most audiences, when I ask who's heard of PAT, maybe 1 or 2 hands goes up. Well, PAT is PTSD for ending a pregnancy. And don't get me wrong here, I'm not comparing myself at all to a war veteran, but imagine, Maureen, how hundreds of thousands of war veterans felt when the American Psychiatric Association declared PTSD in 1980 an official diagnosis.
Yeah, relief.
I need to confess, I've been groping for years how to share this because I want to share this information so people know without a doubt. I'm not here for a religious or political debate. I'm not interested in that. I'm here for the wounded. I'm here for the women like me who never put it together that, the suicidal thinking and the abusive relationships and eating disorders, all the things that happened. I'm here for them. The deed is already done. And the wounded need intensive care. They don't need my judgment. And I don't know about you, but I've never walked a mile in anyone's shoes.
Right.
So I try to judge anyone for anything.
Right.
So when I made that connection, it changed my life. And people always ask me, why do you want to spill your guts about this? Really? Well, it's not about me. I'm here for the women like me who never made the connection of all these symptoms had anything to do with ending a pregnancy, because the world tells you there are no coincidences. There are not coincidences. There are no after effects, right?
Right.
So for me, it was 15 years of hell until I met Jeannie on that plane. And the psychological and physical repercussions of ending a pregnancy, they're not immediately noticeable all the time. Sometimes it's years, or in my case, decades, before you come to recognize the symptoms, because they're phantom symptoms and you think there's something else and something else is wrong. You just don't think it has anything to do with that. So the pamphlet described a 14-week class, and I took that class. It was called Forgiven and Set Free. And through those 14 weeks, I forgave myself and others. And I realized Ginny was right. If you can see it, you can free it. I stopped addictions. I stopped self-sabotaging. In fact, I got a job at CBS television, and I began healthy relationships, most of which last till this day. And that is a triumph. Now, I began to contribute in life then. I wrote a book. I began a speaking career, and I started volunteering and then served on the board of directors for a pregnancy care center. And most of all, I learned what you know, which is that we are beloved. And we have a hope and a future, no matter what we've been through.
Yes.
Because in those 14 weeks, I felt heard and seen and understood. And, science shows that processing feelings and forgiveness with peers in a non-judgmental atmosphere is effective for community healing trauma. I know some of your other guests have lost children and gone through all sorts of things. And in grief groups is where a lot of healing begins. But let me ask you something, Maureen. How do you think most women deal with ending a pregnancy? What do you think they do?
They move on as if it didn't happen.
You're a smart woman. I'll tell you how they deal with it. They pretend it never happened.
Yeah.
And you and I hadn't had this conversation before, so you somehow knew that. And I discovered that this way that most women deal with this left a trail of hopes and broken dreams that are just heartbreaking. So that's why I risk spilling my guts, because there are 63 million women out there that have ended a pregnancy in the last 40 years. And they may need the same relief that I felt when I made the connection. So that's why I spill my guts. And I created a 3-step framework for how to heal for real from PAT. So that's what I guide my clients through. And to wrap up here, Ginny became my best friend and mentor. And she's been my best friend for the last 20 years. And I don't believe in coincidence. It's when God chooses to remain anonymous, right?
That's absolutely right. It's all lined up for you. It is definitely, I believe our paths are planned. We have free will, but I still believe that we will attract what is meant for us. Nothing meant for you will ever miss you. She was meant to be in your life. And I think this is so interesting. Having been in the medical field for so long, now my psychology background, have never heard of PAT. So this is really great. All my guests always bring something new, and this is what I love, is these nuggets of wisdom and information. So I'm certain, being my age at 52 and all this background in medical, how I never knew this is incredible. So Is there like when they diagnose PTSD, is there a checklist that they come across for the PAT? Is
Great
there
question.
okay.
Great question. So the PAT checklist, just like the coincidence, right, that Ginny sat next to me on the plane that day,
Yeah.
or the coincidence that she happened to be the president of a board of directors at a pregnancy and adoption center. I mean, no coincidences. And the coincidence that the pamphlet she had in her purse, because she was the president on the BOD, uh, that is the list. So when this said, do you suffer from starving and stuffing yourself? Do you suffer from picking abusive relationships? Do you suffer? That's the checklist. Those are the phantom symptoms. And let me tell you, Ginny was my compassion bridge to healing. She didn't shame, judge, or blame me. She just listened. She had empathy. And this is where you come in, Maureen. You can be the empathy compassion bridge for others. Because as soon as you see it, you can free it. Now that you know about it, whether you're a grandmother and you realize that your granddaughter is just going to go to college or she's just starting to be active in relationships physically and you want to help her avoid some pain, at least all I ask is that you tell one person what you've learned today about PAT. Just consider sharing it with one other person. And to wrap up here, Ginny, not only has she been my best friend and mentor for 20 years, sometimes we speak at women's conferences. And we were one summer at a seminar, Maureen, and in front of the whole audience, she's at the podium, and she turns to me and she says, Britt, I never did understand why you had to sit next to me on that plane. Now I turned to her and said, Jenny, I had to sit next to you. That's the only seat I saw open. She turns to me and she says, Britt, that plane was almost empty.
Oh, I love that. Full body chills. That is, yes, you saw only what you were supposed to see
To this
on
day,
that
we
plane.
believe God filled that plane with angels. So I'd have to sit next to Ginny and I'd have
Oh,
to change my life and I'd have to see it and free it. And
yes.
hopefully help you or your audience change yours too.
I think that's wonderful, and I do believe in those things that happen. And everyone knows my story of meeting my husband, where the text came through, and we have no idea how it came through. And so I do believe there is definitely divine intervention. Now, we
I love
talk.
that. I heard some of your podcasts with you and your husband, Dennis. That's pretty cool. You guys are amazing.
Def-
Congratulations.
Thank you. Definitely meant for one another after a lot of abusive relationships. So the PAT is post. And the thing that, like you said, when you share this information with others, it really, in my mind, it brought up, how do we do this prevention? I don't even know, to be honest with you. I have a 9 and a 10-year-old granddaughter, and they're going to be getting sex ed, and I don't even know how schools do this now. I don't know, how do we talk to young girls that are coming up and they're going to be sexually active? How do we talk to them when they're going to high school, college? How do we prevent them from going through the post so they don't have to go through that? So we do the pre. What do you think? Do they talk about that at the pregnancy centers?
Absolutely. And that's such a great question because the places that you go, like the clinic I went to, they have positioned themselves strategically on almost every college campus in the United States. So these things happen one on one with your granddaughters. I can't really speak to what's taught in schools or get into that kind of debate. It is far from what will help young people be aware that there are consequences for choices. Instead, they're offering them ways to be sexually active. And unfortunately, the consequences are not just this, they are disease and all sorts of different consequences that really break hopes and dreams and destroy lives. And so we need to get them young. So in my case, my parents didn't talk to me. And years ago, this was before they started teaching what they teach now, and who is so confusing. If I were a child now, I don't think I could make it. But the only sex ed I got was dad came home one day, sat me down, and gave me a book that says, "Where do children come from?" And that was about it, you know?
You got more than I did. You got way more than I did. I got in PE, I think it was PE, and they played the video of, menstruation and the female parts. That is the extent of it. And hence, I end up pregnant at 18 years old and getting married at 19. So, yeah, we didn't talk about it. I think my mother was very uncomfortable. I agree with you. It is a one-on-one individual family choice. I don't think that schools can come from my same understanding and perspective of what I want my children and my grandchildren to know about sex. I just don't think it should be the school's responsibility. I think it should be a family responsibility to, especially parents and or grandparents. I'm raising my grandson who's 14, and trust me, we've already my husband has, we've done the whole talking, and I have to, you'll be proud of this. The thing that I was really proud of my husband, because I was a single parent raising 2 daughters and a son.
I'm proud of you for that. And you don't have these hosts of symptoms. You have you made a choice, and for that, your legacy, your family continues on. In my case, my sister and I were the end of the line right now, and I am considering adoption, which is amazing. But
I love that, because I think there are so many children out there that want loving parents, and so many parents that want children. There's a lot of fits out there. The only, and I don't want to get like you said, political or religious. My only experience of the struggle with that is the legal system. I'm trying to get my grandson to be guardian, and this is where he wants to be, and it's the courts really give a lot of rights to the biological parents, whether they're good parents or not.
Right.
And so that was the thing that my husband talked to my grandson about consent. And I thought that was a really neat part that I, as a single mom raising my son, I didn't really think about that. And that sounds terrible that I didn't consider that. But once the Me Too movement happened, we had to be more aware of our son's behavior, I think. And that was the thing with my grandson, is my husband telling him the whole process of, sex education. I know we're not here for sex education, but
I love Dennis. I love your husband for that, because that's stepping up as a dad to say, by the way, make sure this is all agreeable.
Every step of the way, he said to my grandson, he said, every step of the way, no is no, no matter what. And that was really cool for me to see that. And he doesn't have any daughters, he has a son, and I have a son and 2 daughters. And to be raising my grandchild together with me, I just, I admire him for that. And that he stepped up to the plate where my grandson's dad did not. And so this is really kind of a cool, new, eye-opening thing for that generation, Britt. It's so different. Like you said, 14-year-olds are not what we were at 14. I mean, there's so much. There's so much.
Waiting till marriage. People don't even think of that anymore, but they're huge. They're huge benefits. And I have some friends right now who are making a movie in Texas about their dream of emptying out the whole adoption system. Like you said, there's so many children out there, and so many people that want children and can't get pregnant. So there are solutions if the compartmentalizing and the separation that goes on in all this, the pointing the fingers and the pro this and the pro that or against this, and that's not what it's about. It's about protecting the person who, and letting them know there are consequences. So you asked a really great question about what else could you do. Mm-hmm. So if I knew then what I know now, I would have, when I was on the board of directors of the Pregnancy Care Center, I started as a volunteer, and we offered free ultrasounds. And I will let you know, that when you go, like when I went to that clinic, none of those places will ever offer an ultrasound, much less a free one. Now, I can't say this from every stage that I'm on. Some places are, have more different ideals and would be offended because they're more interested in the argument. I'm, again, talking about the wounded.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that 93% of women who see an ultrasound keep their children. And you will not get an ultrasound or an offer of one when you just go to a clinic. So I don't believe that that's really a real choice. I believe a real choice is when you have all the information, you know that these consequences can happen. You look at ultrasound, you make whatever choice you want. That's, but just to let young people know there are consequences. So if your question as a mom and a grandma, and a good one, if it ever comes up, just to lovingly, I suggest people share with their children, look, if you ever find yourself in this situation, I want you to know you can come to me. I want you to know you don't need to be afraid. Like in my case, I was brought up, you graduate high school, you go to college, you fall in love, you get engaged, you graduate, then you get married, then you have children. That's the order. I did it all out of order, and I was terrified to say anything. And so I got trapped in it, made a decision, and I have to live with the consequences of that decision. And I like to think that now God can use me to help others have the information. So offer to your kids and grandkids, come to me if you ever find yourself in this situation. I'm a safe place. And if you don't feel you can come to me, get an ultrasound.
That's funny because that is the one thing that I always say to my grandkids is I'm the safe space. There's nothing that you cannot come to me for and to tell me. And so just opening the lines of communication, which, in my generation, it just was, we didn't do that. We didn't talk about mental health. We didn't talk about feelings. We didn't talk about all these taboo subjects. And now we are. And I think that's what's really neat about the change in the world that I'm seeing is that we're starting to finally reach out to our fellow humans and love one another and have compassion and say, you know what, I've been there too, and I'm here for you. What can I do to help you? That, I think, is the beauty of what has changed for us. Now, your book, Beyond My Dreams, tell us how that came to be. Tell us what it's about.
Well, Maureen, that might be a second podcast. It's a different subject. My book, Beyond My Dreams, right here, was written as a tribute to my father, Benjamin Franklin Ivy III.
Oh, cool name. And
it was published as a labor of love, a bunch of his poetry that he worked. He was a financier and helped people create wealth for generations. That's what he did. And people didn't know, on planes and whatnot. He wrote poetry on napkins and poems to me as his daughter. And so there's another story here that has to do with the sudden tragic death of my father. So that is a total different podcast, but thank you for asking. And, you seem to have a heart as big as Texas. So I think your kids and grandkids are going to be A-okay. In fact, what did I write down? I wrote something down here. I just love that you love to be real, because that's where the healing is.
Yeah.
You're real. And people love to just hear what's real. And that's, I think, why your podcast is so successful. I looked at your website and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like Vanna White. This lady is amazing. It's just, it's absolutely gorgeous. And the layout and, you're all decked out, and it was a little intimidating at first. And then I listened to your podcast, then you and I had that conversation, and I'm like, this woman is awesome. She is real. People love that.
You're so sweet, and no intimidation here. I think authenticity speaks louder than anything. And to me, it's about the why. And I've always said, just be who you are, and the how falls into place. And I really love that when you're doing what is your purpose, when you're doing the thing you're supposed to do in this life, what you came here to do, helping the people you're supposed to help, you know what? I had to release a lot of that. When you say, if you can see it, you can free it, it was the gotta feel to heal for me. and being, codependent and being in abusive relationships. It was my lack of self-love. I didn't know how to be authentic because I didn't like who I was, and I think that's carrying the shame with the PAT. It goes along with shame of being sexually abused. It goes along with physical abuse. It goes along with any part of life that has been pain. I think that's really it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we all know somebody who we think should have it all together. They look like they have it all together. Their life should be working and they seem to have everything going for them, but keep shooting themselves in the foot. Yeah. And I have found that a big majority of the time when I get to know that person, they may have ended a pregnancy. I have met a woman who is 89 years old and still never told her husband. And it was so many decades ago. It was in the olden days where literally her and her grandma went out and buried, they did it with crochet needles. Aww. And buried the little in a matchbox under a tree and never told anybody. And at one of my seminars, she's like, felt all of a sudden like her life was freed, so it's just information to help people that are suffering and they might not put it together why.
And I think there's something deeper at play here as we wrap up is what's deeper is that you give them permission to speak of it. And I think anytime we speak of anything that has been painful, that we've been holding in, repressing, suppressing, it comes out. Like you said, it's going to be in addictions. It's going to be, all kinds of addictions. It's going to be all kinds of self-abuse and self-sabotage. And you doing this for women gives them the freedom to finally speak of it. And I think once we release anything that has been painful, it's almost like, when dogs have one of those burrs in their fur, and you can't see it, but it's underneath there and it's just stuck and they keep scratching it and then you get it off and it's like, oh, I think it's kind of like that. Those pains and things that we don't let go of, the healing that needs to be done. And we always think it's going to be so hard to talk about it and shameful to talk about it. And it's actually the opposite, which is why I think this is so important to touch on all of these subjects. I don't care what subject it is. It's a human subject. That's what I call it. We're humans having human experiences. So no subject is off limits for me because we've experienced it. If it's your story, we're talking about it. And I thank you for being able to do this, to let women who've held this down, that woman, the 89-year-old who held this in, she, because of you, at 89 years old, found healing. It's never too late, right?
Never too late. Never too late. And I just love that light bulb moment when I see my clients and people. I've got coaching and free resources as well, and BrittIvy.com for anybody out there that wants help with this. And
that's what we were gonna do. I was gonna get to how can we get a hold of Britt and get help for those women that want to reach out.
I knew you were gonna get there, but I just wanted to also. I picked this rose for you because it's the same color as your website, your beautiful website.
Oh, that's so gorgeous! Oh my gosh, you grow those?
That one happened to grow in my yard. I'm not a big gardener.
Wow.
But I do love flowers. I'm a flower child for sure.
Yes, you're a little free bird at heart. I can I can sense it. So yeah, if anyone is needing help, wanting to reach out, they're in a situation where they need to get through this and release this, and they need coaching from you, where do we find you?
Well, I would just send them to BrittIvy.com. That's BrittIvy.com. And when I get more sophisticated at this, I would have a graphic to give you and all that stuff to display. But, it's been a time of just really putting together my 8-module course, which has launched, and just helping women one-on-one, facilitating workshops over years, just being there in person, and now launching this online so women can do this at home as well with guided audio modules. as well as homework, and it's
I
just
love it.
yeah, and the community we have when we come together, and it's just beautiful.
I think we all have an experience that's meant to be a niche for someone that needs to hear it. And so whatever your experience is, there is someone out there. And, the starfish story,
Yes.
it matters to that one. And that's really my purpose for all of this is if one person out there today hears about PAT and listens to Britt and says, I need to get this off my chest. I need to talk to her and figure out how I can heal. Then we've done our job today, Miss Britt. So I always end with marching downtown with all the people behind us. What's on your banner, Britt?
If you can see it, you can free it. My course is called From Post-Abortion Trauma to Post-Abortion Transformation. So helping women be free and live the life they're meant to live. It's not difficult, complicated. It's a simple process, not always easy. But I'm here to guide and guard.
Yeah. And it's so worth it because what's on the other side of this pain and this trauma is life and beauty and hope and future. And it's doing the hard work, but we can do hard things, ladies. We can get through all that we have been through. And I'm speaking to everybody, but especially the women, my sisters today on this planet. So what did you never know that you know now, Britt?
Well, what I never knew was those symptoms was running my life. And I kept shooting myself in the foot, thinking I've had all sorts of opportunity. And why do I keep doing this? I didn't understand the self-selfish. So what I never knew was what was running my life. And now I know. And I'm freed of that. And I can help others grow past it.
How to identify and recognize where the trauma healing needs to take place. And that's the key. Really. We don't know if we don't know until we find out and we get help. And that's why I love the life coaching arena because we do it so out of the box and so different nowadays. And that I think is the beauty of the shift that we don't have to follow exact maps of how therapy should go now. And that's why I think niches are good.
Well, Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, puts it this way. He says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it'll direct your life. Yeah. Call it fate.
Yeah.
Right. But he put it even simpler on that plane. Like she said, if you can see it, you can do it.
Yeah. That's so fabulous. Okay, here we go on my light note. What is shameless self-indulgence?
Oh, definitely chocolate.
Yeah. Dark or milk?
Dark. Actually, I found these new things that I'm all into keto. So these wonderful they're cow butter. So they have fat content. They only have 1 gram of sugar. And they only have 2 grams of carbohydrates, which is unheard of for chocolate. So that's they're called Fat Bar, and I'm actually thinking of buying the company because they're revolutionary. And you can feel great and don't gain weight. I mean, if you can eat 20 then they're
Everything in moderation, people. Everything in moderation. Excuse me. Well, Britt, I mean, you are such a beautiful soul, and thank you for all that you do. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for the hour of life that is a gift to me. Guys, find Britt at BrittIvy.com for any information, comments. Don't forget to do 5-star review on our podcast. Share it, grow the community. Tell your friends if they want to be guests. If you know someone that wants to come on that could help others with their story, we welcome it. I welcome it. And I wish everyone a wonderful, beautiful day, and especially you, Miss Britt Ivy. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the I Never Knew podcast. If you found today's episode inspiring and educational, please be sure to follow, subscribe, and spread the word. The more people that join the Ink community, the more it can develop and influence others as we work together for a healthier and brighter future. Until next time.